Our guest tonight, Jim Grimsley. There's a story about Jim early in his writing career, which was well known at the time, I think, but a lot of people have forgotten it because he's had such an illustrious literary life. But the fact is, back in the 80s and early 90s, Jim couldn't sell a book. He couldn't get his manuscript published. I think it was 10, 12 years he tried to sell his first book to publishers. No one took it. Can you believe publishers are that dumb? And you should have seen what sorts of books publishers were publishing during that time. It would take your breath away. That book was Winter Birds. It went on to, when it was published here by Algonquin, it was a finalist for the Penn Hemingway Award. It won the coveted Sue Kaufman Prize for first fiction. And it was the first of a number of prizes that Jim has won for his novels. He is a playwright. He has been the artistic director at Atlanta's 7 Stages. He's written about 8 books. I may have missed something in there, but close to that. And his current position is that of senior writer in residence at Emory University. And he is also director of the Emory University Creative Writing Program, from which he has earned huzzas from both students and faculty members at Emory, a most distinguished faculty member there. His new novel, it's just out, it's called Forgiveness. It is, call it a morality tale, a very black comedy. It says a lot about some of the things that are wrong with our current society, and it doesn't pull any punches. It is a dazzling book to read. And Jim is just a terrific writer. We're honored to have him. Jim Grimsley, we welcome you.
Hello. Back in the 80s, I couldn't sell a book. I couldn't buy that many either. I was poor as a church mouse. Those paperbacks are actually advanced readers' copies. They're not simultaneous paperbacks, so they're actually more valuable than the hardback in terms of collecting terms. They put out some really beautiful advanced copies. I'm going to hold this book up because some of you may have read some press about it recently. This is my science fiction novel that came out in December, The Last Green Tree. I write science fiction as well as, I'm not going to make you listen to any of the science fiction because one thing, it's got all these words in it that I can't pronounce, that I made up. So, but I thought I'd hold that up since there was some mention of it in the notice that went out. Forgiveness is a real departure for me. It's a book I was very angry when I wrote this book about a lot of things, mostly about television. I just kept watching. Anytime I would slow down with the book, I would go watch late night television, the commercial end of it, the place where they sell things, basically, the cheesier stations. And I'd get so angry at everything again that I'd go back and write for a few more days. Then I'd come out and watch some TV and I'd get angry. I wanted to write about a man who had everything, who had nothing really to struggle with in his life until he loses his job. He is an employee of Arthur Andersen. He loses his job during the Enron scandal. And basically at that point, his life collapses because neither he nor his wife has ever really had to fight for anything. They've only had to spend the money. And this is about the crisis that comes on them when they find out that all that life is not the beautiful thing that they dreamed it would be. I'm going to read you a couple of chapters from the middle of the book. What happens is that he loses his job 2 years ago. They act as if nothing has happened. They've spent nearly every dime they've got, only neither one of them is dealing with it, neither the husband nor the wife. Then finally the wife wises up and decides that she's going to ask for a divorce. And at that point the husband decides to kill her. That's page 1, right there. The book is about his plan to murder his wife, and this first chapter, Purchase, deals with the night of the firing and some other things that he gets into. And then I'm also going to read a chapter called 40 Wax. They're both kind of short. I won't keep you sitting there too long. This is Purchase. In the 2 weeks following my departure from Arthur Anderson, while Carmen remained ignorant that I was now a no-good, out-of-work bum like all the rest, I spent money like it was about to go extinct. We bought a new Capresso coffee robot, even more expensive than the old one, which we gave to Annette, our daughter. I got new golf clubs, a new riding lawnmower, and a new stereo for my home office. We moved our boat to a more expensive slip at the marina, one I'd been trying to get for years. I knew perfectly well I would be selling the boat pretty soon, but even then I took the more expensive space just to have the prestige of it for a few more weeks. I bought a nice Gucci suit that looks like a sack on me that looked great when I saw it on Ben Affleck. Carmen is never one to be outdone in the shopping arena, and when she saw what kind of mood I was in, she decided to redo the kitchen and buy new furniture for the guest house, which is in back of the pool house. So we bought a bed made out of Swedish memory foam once used in a NASA program, and she shopped relentlessly for other excessively stark pieces to match the idea of the bed. I slept in the guest house the night I told her I had lost my job. The Swedish foam space bed had not yet arrived, but I had the old bed with its tired inner spring mattress. Carmen was sobbing hysterically on the phone with her sister Eileen, who lives in Brussels with her diplomatic corps husband. A phone sat on the night table by the bed in the guest house, but I realized with a lurch that there was nobody I could call except my children. My wife had kicked me out of my own house for the night, and I had no one to talk to about it. Parents dead, God bless them both. No brothers or sisters. All my friends from work gone the way of all friends from work, especially when work was the subject of a public scandal. So I could call my son Frank and disturb him from his duties as a young banker and family man, or I could call Annette and disturb her in the precious quiet of late night with her skinny girlfriend passed out from hunger in the next room. I sat on the bed, which creaked with a metallic welcome. Was this really true? Was there nobody I could call? Throughout this crisis, I had begun drinking steadily more. I had always enjoyed alcohol too much, though I usually did my heavy drinking away from the house. Tonight, I thought I would drink at home. Sneaking into the kitchen, I poured myself a stiff vodka. I fiddled with the new coffee machine for a while, but still could not figure out how to turn it on. I drank the vodka. At the top of the stairs sounded a ringing voice. Charlie, that better not be you, bum that you are, in my kitchen. Get out of my house. Get out. I waited for her heavy footfall on the carpeted step, a sound I knew well, and slipped out the back door with my drink, my ice, my bottle. A person's mind forages for comfort on well-beaten paths. Even then I was thinking that if I could only buy the perfect gift for Carmen, I could make everything right. Even with Carmen, as angry as she was, with a good gift I stood a 50-50 chance. Maybe she would want a piece of jewelry. Or maybe that would seem like a reminder of our love, the taste of which went a bit sour in the mouth at the moment. At any rate, jewelry was entirely too portable. She hated every dress I ever bought her, even the ones she picked out, unless she had exchanged them at least twice. So giving her a dress risked that we would both forget what the gift was for by the time she found something she liked. In fact, it is my firm belief that Carmen hated every dress she ever bought the week after she had worn it the first time. She also had a rule about shoes, which was that I was never to buy her any. Maybe we could both go away on a trip together, somewhere more practical than the pilgrimage to the Holy Land she was always talking about. Neither of us had ever seen the Grand Canyon, for instance. We could explore it together, a trip west, symbolic of the need for change. People's lives are often transformed by trips west, especially to scenic vistas like those available near the Grand Canyon. Such a fitting into this troubled period of our lives would become possible there, the two of us reconciled in spite of our troubles, facing an uncertain future but steadfast in our devotion to one another. From where I was sitting, I could suddenly hear her voice, and to make sure I caught every word, she'd opened the window with her own two hands, when for 20 years it's been, Charlie, could you get the window? You know my back. Now she was screaming into the phone at the top of her lungs, because he is a no-good bum, Eileen. All that bullshit about being kept on to help close down the company, a pile of I don't know what, a word I can't say in front of our mother, who is also standing right here looking at me like we're both about to be homeless in the street. She had an artful way of setting the scene, not only for her sister Eileen, but for me and for any of the nearer neighbors who might be listening. A voice like the rasp edge of a saw. What do I know whether he did anything wrong? He's been afraid of getting fired for a year. Can you believe it? A whole year of this, and now it's really happened. Thank God we have a little savings. Well, I don't know what I thought. I thought he was just exaggerating. How would I know? Sure, he'll find another job. What, me? What could I do? For God's sake. Look at you, talking to me about getting a job when you never worked a day in your life. I didn't say I was any different. I didn't say I was any different. You're upsetting Mother. She's upset. She's walking out of the room. She's shaking her head. She's shaking her head at you, not at me. What if we have to go to the shelter, Eileen? What do you mean calm? How can I be calm? Sure, there's money for now. For now. Eileen? Eileen? Whose sister are you? Let me ask you, whose sister are you in the first place? She reached one-handed and snapped the window closed. I could buy her another fur coat. She adored fur in spite of her morbid fear of animal rights activists who might hurl ink at her in public. For this reason, she rarely wore the chinchilla she already owned. Or I could buy her that rock and water feature she'd been wanting for the living room, an installation by some Japanese artist who arranged rocks, water, and sand in pricey combinations with one of those circulating pumps that kept the water gushing like a waterfall. She'd had the photo from her friend Amir's house on her dresser for the last 6 months, face up, where I could see it whenever I passed. After consideration, the rock and water feature was taking on the air of a favorite, though it was sure to cost a lot of money. We should be watching our pennies now that I was out of work, now that we were living on my unemployment and my savings. Our savings, though I earned all the money. For some reason, I feel I must keep pointing out this fact, even though back when we decided Carmen would be a stay-at-home wife, I vowed our marriage was still a partnership and swore I wanted her to stay at home, had never pictured her working. Those words actually came out of my mouth. I can be for women's lib and still stay at home, Carmen reflected. Don't you think? I don't see any contradiction. This was from a conversation a very long time ago, maybe the second year of our marriage. She had been working as an elementary school teacher up until then, but my salary was already enough to support us both. We were still living in that apartment on Baker Heights Avenue, sitting on that flowered sofa. I was in a state of shock. I had just told Carmen, who probably still called herself Lauren at the time, to quit her job. And even though I had clearly said the words of my own volition, I wasn't quite sure why. Carmen was sitting beside me with her tiny hands folded so sweetly in her lap. At the time, she was young and smooth and shiny and very petite, the height of her beauty, while my 25 minutes as a good-looking young man were already over. I was very aware of the difference between us in terms of attractiveness. This difference has shrunk since then, but at the time it was pretty marked. Lauren sat blinking next to me, demure as a sleeping kitten. You're so good to me, Charlie. You can sit here all day and read books about women's liberation if that makes you feel better. I'm sure I'll be all right after I get used to it, she said. I'm so lucky. My sister Eileen is supporting her husband through law school. She's working all the time, poor thing. Which was true, of course, and which brought into question the aforementioned accusation that Sister Eileen never worked a day in her life. Not that I want to bring up every little fact that Carmen gets wrong. Years later, jobless, sitting in the guest house, listening to the edges of Carmen's harangue, I heard my cell phone ring on the nightstand beside me. The sound startled me, as if I had never heard the ringtone before. Salvation, in spite of my doubt. Here was a friend from work, perhaps, or even Frank or Anne, who had heard about their father's misfortune and called to show their support. I picked up the receiver hopefully, said hello, and a few minutes later pledged $50 to the local fraternal order of the police. In the silence after the call, I failed to make any headway in any direction that led toward standing up or leaving that room. My life was ringing with disaster fallen on it like a fresh axe. I couldn't make any headway against the premonition of more disaster to come. I sat like a lump of lead that was once a lump of gold. I'm going to skip a little bit here. If I were a religious man, I would have had a religious specialist to call. I skipped the part where he makes a very bad sandwich. He's drunk. So. All right. If I were a religious man, I would have had a religious specialist to call. I could have chatted with my rabbi, my priest, my imam. Any visiting shaman would have worked fine for me as long as he or she could by intuition figure out to dial my number in my hour of need. This was the kind of self-centered person I had become. You would have had to find me to help me. I wouldn't lift a finger until you did. The perfect gift for Carmen was nearly always a new car of one kind or another. We had been married 26 years, and I must have bought her 15 cars. She had the two-door, the minivan, the first SUV off the line. She had the Mercedes S-Class, the Subaru Outback. At the moment, she had two cars, the S-Class Mercedes and a hybrid something or other from Toyota. She mostly drove the S-Class except when she attended certain greener kinds of functions, in which case she drove the hybrid. She pretended to want to give the Mercedes to Anne, but only because she knew I would never, ever agree to it, and therefore she could keep both cars. At the time a first wave of new SUV longing was sweeping over her, I had already begun to notice it before my crisis. Maybe I could buy her a new car. The picture was beginning to clear. As I had been doing for the last 2 weeks, I reviewed all the money I had in any bank, anywhere. All the stocks, the bonds, the money markets, which had hardly earned anything. I'd saved a lot. Enough to keep us for 2 good years without even slowing down. And surely by then I would have a job. I'd better. Carmen was hardly built for hard times, and neither was I. If we sold the S-Class and the hybrid, no, just the S-Class, and bought her a new Lexus SUV. I'd seen the way she thirsted for one when we were watching the commercials, the fleet, lone, streamlined body tearing along the solitary western highway, not a building or an automobile in sight, and Carmen picturing herself at the wheel, shifting effortlessly, though in real life she drives an automatic. It always comes down to some kind of purchase, to some exchange involving the market. We hurt one another in some way, or some disaster happens, and in response, we buy something. We need to say how happy we are due to some great occasion, like a wedding or the birth of a child, and to express ourselves, we buy something. We lose a loved one, or a friend loses a loved one, and in response, we purchase some service, or buy some card, or offer some gift of food, traded for money one way or another, because it is the medium of all exchange. The solution to any problem always returns us to the market. I would have to go to the market to appease Carmen. I would have to go to the market more than once. At some local dealership, I would haggle uncertainly with the Lexus salesman of the moment until we reached an agreeable bargain involving 2 cars and a considerable amount of cash. This offering of peace I would give to Carmen to assure her that nothing would change in our lives due to my unemployment. Like all our transactions in the past, this one would be based on shaky moral principles, including my presumption that Carmen would flee if I could not give her the material life she wanted. Also included my presumption that Carmen would act out of the worst part of her character now that she knew I had no job. In our marriage, there had never been any question of pulling together to do anything. The money had done everything for us. There had never been any reason to make much of an effort. I would also have to go to the market with myself, too, and no longer fresh or new, bright as this year's penny. I would be that dull penny from years ago, shunted from pocket to pocket. To find another job, I would have to make a transaction of myself, announce to the market that I was available, openly flaunting my charms via whatever media I could bend to the task, the finest resume papers and envelopes, the most thoroughgoing job listing websites, conspicuously perfect attendance at all my outplacement counseling sessions, immaculate grooming at all times. I was my only product, and I was once again available for purchase. O market which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. where we shall shop in eternal happiness and find countless tasteful products, where we shall never need to talk to each other but only to give each other presents. O market of markets, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one market. As it was sold in the beginning, it is so sold now and ever shall be, market without end. Amen. Even then I was beginning to feel the divine nature of markets, which expand and contract without regard to human emotion, which answer only to the higher laws of competition and natural selection. Perhaps all the Eastern religions are wrong, along with all the Western ones. God is not everywhere all at once. He is not some vibration sounding through the universe. God is not an all-seeing, all-knowing anything. God is a market. God is the market, the free one, of course. If I were religious and had the aid of a religious professional, I would be able to pray. Right there in the guest house with the light moving strangely on the ceiling, reflected from the surface of the pool, I could get on my knees and ask the religious professional to say something appropriate to open this dialogue. I would pour out my heart in comfortable increments to a God who would reward me with solace, peace of mind, and a guarantee of a new job at the same salary as before. Arthur Andersen had failed the market and paid a great price. How much of that price was laid on my head personally? Was my debt paid by my present unemployment, or was there still more to come? In purchasing a gift for Carmen, I would not only be appeasing her sense of our place in the world, I would also be appeasing the market. Making a transaction as an offering would allow me to apologize for any way in which I had failed the market too, along with Arthur Andersen and Enron. Ways in which I had failed personally, and debts that I personally would have to pay. At the time, there was sparse furniture in the guest house. We had moved a lot of the old junk out to make room for the new furniture that would be arriving along with the Swedish foam bed. I was sitting in the dark, pretty much too drunk to find a light switch. I'd finished eating the horrible sandwich and was waiting for something else to do. Somehow I managed to turn on the TV, or maybe it had been on all along. It was not at all unusual to walk into a room in our house and find a TV playing and no one watching. Maybe this TV had been playing all night and I'd never once registered what was on the screen. Maybe it had been playing for months and no one had ever noticed. The alcohol altered my hearing a bit, adding a quality of drippiness and dringiness, as if all sound in the world were being filtered through someone's bathroom pipes. A cool hand lay on my forehead, rested there quite gently, asking for nothing. Perfect, cool, smooth skin touched mine and called something out of me. I opened my eyes, expecting it was Carmen, expecting she had calmed down and was ready to talk. The person who was sitting there, though, was Sigourney Weaver in the outfit from Aliens, the second movie in the Alien series, where she saves the blonde hunk Marine played by Michael Biehn and the little blonde girl played by a little blonde girl, only to have them both die in the wait for the third episode. The person sitting here was Sigourney Weaver, but as that version of Ripley, still with a bit of hope remaining, not yet the completely despairing Ripley of Aliens 3 or the monster Ripley of 4. She was holding an automatic rifle and pointed it at my head. The tip was so cold it sucked all the heat out of my body just by touching me. You want me to do it? Do what? Pull the trigger? Wise up. This is a movie. We don't have all day. This is not a movie. I just lost my job here. So I guess you want to look at my tits, Sigourney said. Please, just shoot me, I said. Go ahead and shoot me. Oh, come on, my tits can't be that bad. You know what I mean. I deserve to die. Pull the trigger. I should, she said, before that thing comes crawling out of you. She smiles a smile so sinister it might indeed have come out of Ripley in 4. You looking for some kind of sympathy? My wife won't even talk to me. She must have liked your job. I liked my job, I said. As usual, Weaver wasn't showing much emotion on the surface, a kind of elfin bemusement in the expression, with something dangerous in the set of the jaw and the placement of the teeth, just visible between parted lips. You'll get another one. That's how it works, right? I finish one movie, I get another one. One of these days they'll kill Ripley and she won't come back. You think so? She's amused at the thought, not in the least threatened. Or some other actor will play her, someone younger. That hit home. I could see it. But the placid expression settled over her face again. I'm a visitation, she said. Don't piss me off. Sorry. I'm your warning that things could get really strange from here on out. She shoved the gun into my mouth and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened except that the next moment she wasn't there anymore, and I was looking around trying to remember where I was, and it came to me that this was the guest house next to the pool house, but it was also more or less the dog house, and I was in it, and I had apparently passed out and hallucinated for a while. I blinked myself awake, trying to remember the vision I had been having, the actual presence of a movie star with a semi-automatic weapon shoved into my mouth. Was I going to buy Carmen a car? Was that what I had decided? From the house, the dead silence of early morning was almost throbbing around me, and when I stumbled onto the lawn, my socks were soaked with dew. I stood there blinking with sodden feet, looking at the back of the house. No lights, all blank and dark. Carmen had taken an Ambien and gone to bed. Why couldn't I take an Ambien too? That's purchase. Now I'm going to read a shorter section, and then I'm going to stop and take some questions and talk to you guys for a bit. In the next chapter, you'll know what it's about as soon as I read the first line. I dress and drive to Home Depot to shop for a hatchet. For this purchase, I stop for money at an ATM on the way. To my shock, the machine won't give me $500. According to the running balance on the bottom of the transaction record, I only have about $100 left in the account. I'm stunned and suddenly afraid. But I withdraw this last bit of cash and look at it till the person behind me waiting for the ATM clears her throat conspicuously. I walk away, sliding the bills into my pocket. There's no more money after this. Since I've always handled the finances, I'm the only one who knows, though Carmen will find out the next time she tries to get money out of the ATM herself. She'll think it's just another screw-up, that all I'll need to do is move more money out of our savings. It will be news to her that our savings are gone. Our retirement is gone. Our mortgage is in arrears. We're a quarter of an inch from the wall and barreling toward it at top speed. I pocket my cash and head for the hardware store. It's arguable that in the case of buying an axe with which to murder my wife, I ought to consider shopping at a local independent hardware dealer. It would be prudent to search out a store of the mom and pop variety, maybe even to drive to a small rural town somewhere outside this not-to-be-named suburb in which I live. In a bucolic village hardware store, I might purchase a hatchet and leave no computerized record of the transaction whatsoever. But even as I consider this, I see Lenny Briscoe from Law and Order showing my black and white Arthur Anderson corporate photo to Mom or Pop, standing behind the manual cash register. You ever see this guy in here, maybe to buy a mall-type tool like an axe? This guy? Oh, yeah, I remember this guy. Drove one of them luxury SUVs from Japan. Seemed real nervous-like. He give you a name? No, sir, detective. Paid cash. Really sweaty cash, too. I had to leave it out on the counter to dry for a while. Can you describe him? Well, you just showed me a picture of him. Well, describe him anyway. Ugly fellow, bald, not quite a comb-over, but close. Fat, never worked a day in his life. Pale, like he came from the city. No offense, sir. Not even one of them fake tans, which we have a tanning parlor like that right here in Sioux City. That must be great for the single scene, quips Lenny. Behind him is the vaguer outline of his partner, an actor of color, new this season, handsome, earnest, athletic in his moderately priced suit. Partner smiles at Lenny's quip. Cut to me in the Japanese luxury SUV again, driving to the anonymity of a busy Home Depot on a weekend afternoon. Home Depot always has a cheerful, high-ceilinged, anything is possible feel to it. As I enter the automatic doors, I find myself walking a bit straighter, sucking in my stomach, attempting to appear as though I might actually use some of these burly tools on the shelves. I wander around the windows section, looking at all the different kinds of windows a person can buy. People are buying hot dogs at the stand near the end of the checkout lanes. I am hungry for a hot dog, but decide it's better to speak to as few people as possible. The axes and hatchets are harder to find than I expect, and I wander into the garden section, scratching my head beside trays of spring flowers. A young woman wearing a Home Depot apron smiles at me. She has an oval face made arresting by eyes of the coldest blue I have ever seen. She is about as tall as my daughter, but has a better proportion, though still a rather generous figure. Her name tag reads Lizzie. She looks a lot like Elizabeth Montgomery from Bewitched. For a moment she has a perfectly blank, almost frightening expression. Then she smiles and a human light floods her features. Are you looking for help with plants? No, I'm here to shop for a hatchet. Here? This is the garden section. I wandered in here because of the crowd. I'm not as fond of crowds as I used to be. It's only like this on weekends. Lizzie gives me a wide-eyed look that means she is probably wearing contact lenses, though I can't see them. She appears to be watching me, but I appear to be standing somewhere else in her vision. But I guess that makes sense. Working people can't come here during the week. I certainly can't. I have to be at work pretty early in the morning, I say. She is very curvaceous, coming up to about my shoulder, with a plump shape that has the appearance of a solid, firm flesh, not the powdery cellulitish corpulence of Carmen. Her perfume has an old-fashioned mellow tone, a hint of roses and jasmine. What kind of work do you do, she asks. Hospital consulting. I'm a billings consultant. That sounds interesting. I take it you're a garden expert. Part-time, she says. Pride in her finances induces her to explain further. I only work here for something to do, really. I own some real estate, and that's how I make most of my money. Real estate. I don't trust stocks, she says. I put my money in houses and land. She has a wicked gleam in her eye when she's discussing her property. I wish I had done more of that, I say. Were you messed up in the crash? I'm not sure which crash she means. But the conversation is beginning to strike a bit close to home. Time for another lie. I lost a little, not very much. I bought a couple of houses right before stocks went in the tank. I guess I just had a feeling. I scratched my head, giving her something of an earnest look, but a fake one to match the look of fake friendliness she is giving me. Smart, she says. What does a man like you need with a hatchet? I only hesitate a moment. I'm planning to kill somebody with it. She nods, hardly blinking. You'll want something with a wooden handle. Wood gives you a good grip, and you can break off the handle and put it in the fireplace afterwards. I don't have a fireplace. In the old days, you could wash off the hatchet and then cover it with the ash to get rid of the blood evidence. These days, there's luminol, so I don't know. My, I say, you do seem to know what you're talking about. A hatchet would not be my choice anymore. What would you use? I'd have to think about it, she says, in a non-committal way. Poison, maybe. Did you ever want to kill somebody? She favors me with the most demure little smile. I don't believe that's a proper question for a gentleman to ask a lady. My nearness to her is giving me a bit of an erection. She looks so much like Elizabeth Montgomery that I almost ask her what happened to the first Darren, and I am aware of the fact that Montgomery did once play Lizzie Borden in a TV movie, but that doesn't explain the sudden stiffening of my interest. Truth is, a bit of an erection is all I usually have these days, but right now it's feeling fairly functional. Something about her voice, the way it makes the skin at the back of my neck shiver. I am pointing this out here as further proof that I am not gay. My apologies, I say. She turns back to her watering, letting the fine spray drift over pots of impatiens. I go on standing there waiting for my woody to fade. I suppose she thinks I'm creepy. Just as I'm about to leave, however, she turns back to me for a moment. You should get a good haircut and maybe lose 10 pounds. Appearances are very important if you want to kill somebody and get acquitted. I look down at the expanse of my belly under the knit shirt I'm wearing. She's being generous. 10 pounds wouldn't even make a dent. I don't have time for a diet, but maybe I could get a haircut and a facial, I say. In a hurry? Yes. Don't be. Wait for the perfect time. Some quiet morning when you catch her in the right room and there's nobody around. You'll know when the moment is right. She turns away again. Those firm, round buttocks are fighting against the fabric of her skirt. What a fine thing to see the ripe shape of a woman's body standing up to her clothing. She's right, of course. But I don't have enough money left to buy myself the luxury of more time. When I think about the fact that I've got maybe $100 to my name, a tightness comes to my breathing, and I feel as if I need to get outside, in the open, as quickly as I can. This would be a bad place for me to buy an axe anyway. Too many people have seen me talking to Lizzie Borden here. Someone is sure to remember. I'll use a butcher knife, I think. We already have a couple of those. We have a completely equipped kitchen just in case anybody who visits us ever wants to cook in it. Charlie Stranger took a knife and with it finished off his wife. When he saw what he had done, he killed his daughter and his son. Knife works just as well as axe when it comes to the rhyme scheme for a cute, memorable little ditty, but it's not quite as edgy. I miss the 40 wax. Okay, that's it. Thank you. I've never written a book quite like that one before, so I'd be interested to hear anything you have to say, answer any questions, or we could just all go home. This is the awkward silence part of the event, this next couple of seconds here. From the first paragraph, he was himself. I could hear him. I knew he was not Southern. I began to understand he's probably Northeastern. But I tried not to figure it out any more specifically than that because he clearly didn't want me to. It just, the voice fit, that's all I can say. It's very far from the Southern idiom, and that really does please me quite a lot. It was a bit more of a departure than I think my old publisher Algonquin was ready for, but Bill?
Charlie speaks early on about wanting to have what he's training to do more at times.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about how much he'd like to be.
He wants to be famous, yeah.
Can you draw any kind of parallels with the Virginia Tech incident, which occurred long after you had completed?
You know, what surprises me about Virginia Tech and what surprised me about Columbine was how we go through the same spasm of reactions. That's part of what this book is trying to talk about. We obliterate the last time this happened. We talk about Virginia Tech now as if there never was a Columbine, as if there never was a University of Texas 30 years ago. We act as if this is completely inexplicable, and it seems to me that's so persistent and illogical, given how much of this we've seen by now, that it's really tough. You cannot avoid thinking that these people want notoriety. All of them, in some way. They want to make some kind of big splash. That became very evident by the way that the whole event was manipulated in Virginia Tech. The sending of the tape and this committing of public murder is part of what this book is about. It is not. It was also my satire on the notion of heterosexual marriage at the point when gay marriage was such a topic. That was actually what set this book off. I'm not saying that straight people don't ever make good marriages, but there's certainly a lot of examples of really horrible marriages and relationships on all sides of the fence, and so that's part of what I was trying to talk about here. Yeah.
First passage speaks quite a lot about the
Mm-hmm.
scope of anger in television. What do you imagine one describes the changes in likeness
You know, it's a good thing that that's not part of my job description. Making what I would, if I could change anything, I'd just give people good sense, because a lot of this just stems from the kind of greed this person's talking about. He's got everything in the world, but the only thing you can do when you get to his place is have more. It just seems to be the only answer that we provide in our culture for how to live, is to accumulate more and more and more. And we love people who accumulate so much that it's unfathomable. I mean, we want to read about Bill Gates. We want to read about movie stars. We want to read about... So I don't know how to answer that question. I would restore local life and obliterate the culture of fame. It would probably reinvent itself pretty quickly, but maybe it would take a while. And then somebody else would have to come along and obliterate it again. There's no good answer to that question. But the book is really about things that do matter to me. It's the problem I have with the book, especially when I'm presenting, is I see all these women's faces, and I'm wondering, this man sounds, he's so against his wife that I want you to understand that if you read the whole book, what you're going to do is get a look at him that's very grim. He's no hero. My thinking when I was conceiving the book was that I couldn't write it about a wife killing her husband because that's so easy to justify most of the time. Whereas you fight with the notion of a husband killing his wife, and that's the kind of attention that you are supposed to bring to the novel. You're not supposed to like this man. You're supposed to question what he's telling you the whole time. And I hope you did pick up on that, because he's certainly not a nice person. Yeah. It was really fun. It's good to see you guys, for one thing. It stalled me, actually. I got to the point where he decided he was going to go there and buy an axe. I knew I wanted a chapter called 40 Whacks. So that meant I had to stop for a couple of months and read everything I could about Lizzie Borden. And she was, when you read that story, there's never been a more calculating person alive. I mean, she caught her mother her stepmother, in an upstairs bedroom, just chopped her to death with an axe, probably was naked when she did it, then went downstairs, took her dress off again, and finished off her dad. And then very calmly, while the police were searching her apartment, burned the evidence in the stove. I mean, one of her neighbors came in while she was stuffing a dress into the stove that they figured was the blood stain. She'd never have gotten away with it in this day and age. But what she was playing on was the presumption was that a woman was just too demure. A woman would never have killed for the reasons that person had, especially not so savagely. I mean, if she'd poisoned them, they might have suspected her. But chopping them with a hatchet was so unladylike that nobody would think that she would have done it. And the problem with a section like that, though, is that you overwrite it. You get ambitious after you do research. And at one point I had like this 40-page Lizzie Borden section. The book's only like 200 pages, and I'm going, okay, this got to go. A lot of this is junk. So I had to cut it back to what would actually work. And then the notion of having it all. Lizzie Borden didn't make sense until I remembered that Elizabeth Montgomery had played her. Because he's constantly seeing movie stars everywhere he goes. He's so media obsessed that one of the first things that happens is he goes to a Starbucks and Nicole Kidman sits down and has coffee with him, and they talk about their divorces. So, I don't know. I landed somewhere distant from that question, but I think there was an answer in there somewhere. Maybe one more, two more. Yeah.
It's a real political book.
Mm-hmm.
You bring specific politics into the book, or is it too?
Well, let me read you the last page. It's very short. This is the epilogue. President Bush had this to say about my case when he was taking questions on family values at a recent press conference at the White House. I think if he's guilty of the crimes he committed, he should duly be punished underneath the law of whatever, the state where he lives. That's the beauty of our justice here, you know. Even a criminal like this man will get his day in court. He's lucky he killed his wife in America. Next question. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you.